What's up, everybody? This is Mr. Howard, and we are back with this week's Raw Talk. We're going to be switching to a more weekly recap style show instead of just covering Raw, because as you guys should know if you have been watching, a lot more interesting stuff has been happening. There's a ton more content to cover, so I think what we're going to do is we'll start with Raw, we will move over to SmackDown, then we will cover NXT and the Cruiserweight Classic, and then we'll wrap it up, alright? So, this Monday on Raw, we had a pretty interesting start. We saw Stephanie McMahon come out, followed by Shane, and they announced the general managers for SmackDown and Raw. Stephanie picked Mick Foley, and the crowd was extremely excited. I did not expect Mick Foley at all, and it was a extremely pleasant surprise. I couldn't have been happier with the pick, honestly. Shane, of course, as many people had speculated, chose Daniel Bryan to be the SmackDown general manager, and the crowd absolutely went nuts. Everybody in the stadium was doing the yes chant, and they just kind of went back and forth in the ring between Steph and Shane, kind of playfully. The first match of the night was a tag team match between Cesaro and Sami Zayn versus Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens. As usual, Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens would go at it, and you know, they don't let up until someone breaks it up. I believe Cesaro hit a nice superplex on Chris Jericho, and maybe about 6 or 7 minutes into the match, Sammy got a nice roll-up pin on Chris Jericho, pretty much out of nowhere, and ended up winning the match for him and Cesaro. Jericho and Owens were obviously not happy, and it kind of makes Zayn and Cesaro, for that matter, but especially Zayn, look strong going into his Battleground match. Next up, we had John Cena come out to the ring and cut a promo that was pretty interesting. Then Enzo and Cass came out, and of course the club interrupt, and then the New Day come out, and then the Wyatt family came out, and it was kind of a shit show full of promos. They ended up making a big tag team match out of everybody who was in the ring. So John Cena teamed up with Enzo and Cass, as well as the New Day, and they took on the club of Anderson, Gallows, and Styles, along with the Wyatt family as well. So, pretty big match. I was excited. They definitely were making this Monday Night Raw something to remember, presumably because the draft was coming up, and they really just wanted to make the last combined Monday Night Raw a good one, I suppose. So, the New Day and the Wyatt family, we're fighting outside a lot. We got to see a really cool spot where Big Cass and Braun Strowman had a stare down. Eventually, the New Day and the Wyatts kind of fight to the back, and they effectively are out of the match. Enzo ends up hitting John Cena by accident when he went to attack AJ Styles from behind, and AJ Styles hits the Styles Clash on Enzo to win the match for the club. So, this was interesting because it definitely set up the club looking strong, and the Wyatts and the New Day, I guess you could say, are on pretty even playing fields. I still think the Wyatt family has a little bit of an advantage in that feud, but, we'll have to wait and see what happens at Battleground. Next up, we saw Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch taking on Charlotte and Dana Brooke. During the match, Natalya came out and attacked Becky, but it definitely was not a very long match, to say the least. The main event was Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins for the WWE title. They went back and forth, hitting each other's finishers. and I believe the match ended when a superplex was hit, and both guys basically had their shoulders on the mat, and the referee pinned the 3 count, effectively leading the match to end in a draw, which meant Dean Ambrose would retain the title. There was a little bit of a controversy as Seth Rollins believed he won, so he kind of took the belt and ran up the ramp. They showed a network exclusive as to what happened after Raw went off the air, and Shane basically came out and said, look, the match ended in a draw. It wasn't a clear win. Therefore, still the champ, Dean Ambrose title, the following night on SmackDown. So this was the draft. So we're gonna jump in here. I was very excited for this, and I can't say I was that disappointed. There were a couple picks I wish went to the opposite brand that they got chosen for. But overall, I'd say it was pretty good. So Monday Night Raw would get the first pick of each round, and they would also get 3 picks for every 2 picks SmackDown got. This being because they are a 3-hour show, and they need more talent to fill up the 3 hours, which is understandable. So, of course, Stephanie McMahon comes out and announces that her number 1 pick is Seth Rollins. This was not surprising at all. You could tell Mick Foley wasn't completely behind it, but as he had mentioned when working with Steph, they had to come to a lot of compromises, and that will be noted a couple picks into the draft as well. SmackDown responded with Dean Ambrose, and they believe that he will walk out of Battleground the world champion, which I agree, but I feel like there's going to be some kind of I feel like at Battleground they're going to have to do something where there's somewhat of a draw, and that would then split up the world title, so each brand has a world title effectively. If not, then I would say Dean Ambrose wins cleanly, and they simply announce a new world champion on Raw, bringing back probably the World Heavyweight Championship, I would assume, although that's kind of up in the air as to what they would do there. We also got to find out the second pick for Raw was Charlotte, and with her came the Women's Championship, so that was a pretty good pick. SmackDown chose AJ Styles, and then Raw dropped the bombshell of picking the first NXT superstar in Finn Balor. So Finn Balor and AJ Styles being on separate shows kind of set up, in my opinion, a way for them to split the club up and maybe create a feud there somewhere. We will find out what happened to Anderson and Gallows a little bit later on, but I just thought that was interesting. SmackDown responded with John Cena, and Raw then drafted Roman Reigns. If we look back, the compromise was that Stephanie wanted Seth Rollins on the brand, Mick Foley wanted Roman Reigns on the brand, so they both kind of got what they wanted, in the first 5 picks of the brand. SmackDown chose Randy Orton after that, which I thought was a great asset. I can't wait for him to return. Raw chose Brock Lesnar, which is a good pick, but I was kind of surprised because he's definitely more of a part-timer, than pretty much any other superstar, with the exception of like The Undertaker and The Rock and Triple H and those guys. So I was kind of curious as to why they chose him, but good pick nonetheless. SmackDown chose Bray Wyatt, and the response to that was Raw picking the New Day, including the Tag Team Championships. They got 3 superstars and the belts, which was a really great pick. SmackDown chose their first diva with Becky Lynch, which I thought she fits the SmackDown brand perfectly, and I was very happy for that. Raw picked Sami Zayn, which I found a little bit surprising, but should be a good asset to the show. SmackDown responded by choosing The Miz, who comes with Maurice, by the way, and you could tell Daniel Bryan wasn't exactly happy about the pick, but they wanted the Intercontinental Championship, therefore they kind of had to choose The Miz. Raw then chose Sasha Banks in the second diva pick, and that is good because Sasha definitely deserves to be in the women's title hunt. SmackDown chose Baron Corbin, which I thought was a great pick, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they have for him in the future. Raw chose Chris Jericho, and SmackDown responded with their first pick from NXT, choosing the probably the best tag team in NXT, American Alpha. They will have plenty of competition. We will talk about some of the other teams that got drafted to SmackDown, but it'll be interesting to see if they split up the tag titles, so there's tag belts on both shows. I really don't know what their plans are for the future, but I have to say the assumption is that, that they will have an even amount of titles on both shows. So I will be right back. We're going to start up another match, and then we will continue going over the 2016 WWE Draft. Alright, so continuing with the WWE Draft, we move back to SmackDown. Their next pick was the United States Champion Rusev, who came with Lana, and I'm assuming that was kind of just a response to the pick of The Miz, so that Raw would get a mid-card title. SmackDown responded by picking Dolph Ziggler. Raw then chose Kevin Owens. SmackDown went back and chose Natalya, which I thought was interesting because she basically was, the second diva that they chose, and that basically means they want to continue the feud between her and Becky Lynch. I'm a little bit concerned that they don't have a title for the women on SmackDown, because as we will find out, there is a good handful of women being drafted to SmackDown, so I'm hoping that changes in some way. I feel like they deserve to be able to achieve something by winning and being successful, and if they don't, that would suck. Going back to Raw, they chose arguably the best tag team in the entire company, Enzo and Cass. I was kind of disappointed. I was hoping they went to SmackDown because, SmackDown is looking like the better brand, and I was really hoping Enzo and Cass would be drafted there to kind of solidify that. But they proved that both brands are pretty even overall. With that being said, SmackDown responded by, and easily in one of the last rounds, and there were still plenty of people that I was really surprised hadn't been drafted yet. One guy in particular that we will talk about in a couple picks. But, I was just a little bit disappointed with Del Rio being on SmackDown, because SmackDown was shaping up to be my favorite looking show, and I'm kind of disappointed I'm going to have to, deal with Del Rio. So Raw then responded by drafting Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson together, the club. So that means that SmackDown has AJ Styles, Raw has Luke Gallows, Carl Anderson, and Finn Balor. So my assumption is that Finn Balor will pick up the leadership role of the club over on Raw, and this could possibly lead to some kind of a feud between Balor and Styles down the line. There isn't any feud I'd rather see right now. That is honestly the number one match that I want to see. Let's see what we got here. So, SmackDown shows the Usos, and Raw responded with the Big Show. SmackDown then chose Kane, and Raw came back with the third overall NXT pick, choosing Nia Jax to go to Raw. I was a little bit surprised, and, you know, when we talk about what happened on NXT the next night, this definitely makes it a little bit more interesting now that Nia Jax is known to be going to Raw. But we'll talk more about that then. SmackDown chose Kalisto. Raw responded by choosing Neville. SmackDown chose Naomi. And Raw chose Cesaro. Now, Cesaro, I believe, was like the 17th overall pick to Raw. Not the overall pick in the draft. The 17th pick that Raw made. So he was pretty far into the draft. And he was clearly disappointed when they did a backstage interview with him. He was saying how he really didn't care about the drama going on between the GMs and the commissioners, and that, the draft should be all about the superstars, and he was disappointed he didn't get drafted to SmackDown because he thought that was kind of what the future was, and he wanted to be a part of it, but that he would make the best of being on Raw, as he believed it was still the flagship show of the brand. I was incredibly disappointed that he didn't get drafted sooner, and I was really hoping he got drafted to SmackDown. My hope is that somehow him and Del Rio get traded for one another, because then I wouldn't have to deal with Del Rio as much, and I could enjoy Cesaro, taking control of the division over on SmackDown. SmackDown chose the Ascension. Raw then chose Sheamus. SmackDown then chose Zack Ryder. They chose Apollo Crews. They also chose another pick from NXT, being Alexa Bliss. They chose Eva Marie. They chose Eric Rowan. And then the last NXT picks, the last picks of SmackDown, were Mojo Rawley and Carmella. So those were both really great. Raw chose Paige again, another person that was way too far down the list. I would have picked her in probably the third round, honestly. Raw also chose Darren Young. They chose Sin Cara, effectively splitting up the Lucha Dragons. Raw chose the Dudley Boys. They chose Braun Strowman, which splits up the Wyatt family. They chose what I found funny, Raw chose Bo Dallas. They chose Curtis Axel, but they didn't choose Heath Slater, and neither did SmackDown. So Heath Slater has technically not been drafted, and that's a storyline I'm sure they will be talking about in the coming weeks. So we are going to move on to covering NXT. We will be right back, and we'll talk about what happened there. Alright, so we are back covering NXT. Not a ton took place tonight. As you could tell, they were kind of, hyping us for the Cruiserweight Classic, which we will also talk about in a couple minutes. But notable events were Samoa Joe versus Rhino. Rhino seemed to be challenging Samoa Joe. And I believe if he won the match, he would have been granted a title shot. But I think this match was more, put on the card as a way to kind of put Joe in action, but to also kind of put off the feud with Shinsuke Nakamura, which I feel like is kind of inevitable at this point. Nakamura beat Finn Balor last week on NXT, and if you haven't seen that match, I highly recommend watching it. But Rhino basically put on a pretty good showing. He went to hit the gore on Samoa Joe, but Joe countered and ended up trapping Rhino into the Coquina clutch, and ended up getting Samoa Joe ended up getting a submission victory over Rhino, kind of definitely solidifying that Nakamura will be the #1 contender in the near future. Nakamura versus Joe, I am super excited about, as that is not something I've ever seen, and I'm not sure they have ever actually wrestled before. If they have, definitely haven't seen it, but I will be definitely looking that up after this video to find out. After that, we had a match between Austin Aries, and for those of you who watch Tough Enough, Patrick Clark. He was the kid that definitely knew the most about wrestling, at least from a fan perspective, during the show. He was incredibly athletic, and in many of the competitions he did very well. So he kind of had his debut match on NXT against Austin Aries, and you know, he got a couple hits in here and there, but you could tell it was definitely just a match to give him a little bit of practice. Austin Aries pretty much destroyed him, and eventually made Patrick Clark tap out to the last chancery, which is his version of the Muda Lock. After the match, we saw No Way Jose come out, only instead of his normal happy-go-lucky self, he was pretty upset. He came out and attacked Austin Aries, running Aries out of the arena through the crowd, and this seems like a feud that will definitely be one of the main focuses of the next NXT TakeOver, and I definitely recommend keeping an eye on it if you weren't already. To finish the show, we had a #1 contenders match for Asuka's NXT Women's title. The match took place between Bayley and Nia Jax. Now, if you recall, Nia Jax was drafted to Raw the night before, so this was effectively her last NXT show, assuming she lost the title match. With her being drafted to Raw, it didn't seem likely that she would win, and after putting on a pretty good match with Bayley, she basically climbed to the middle rope like she was going to do a flying leg drop, but Bayley caught up with her, got up on the ropes with her, and did a super Bayley to belly, I guess you could call it, into the middle of the ring, and would pick up the win via pinfall. The match was definitely notable, and it set Bayley up to take on Asuka for the NXT Women's title. Something to think about is that Sasha Banks is going to be facing Charlotte and Dana Brooke in a tag match at Battleground, but we do not know who Sasha's tag team partner is. Now, a lot of people have been speculating that tag team partner was going to be the debut of Bayley. But with that being said, we have some new information now with the draft coming and going, and it doesn't look like Bayley is going to be debuting. Now, if she does, I won't be surprised, but it's not looking like it's going to be her, because if Bayley goes up to the main roster now, it doesn't seem like Asuka is going to have anyone even remotely close to challenging her. Nia Jax got drafted to Raw, Carmella and Alexa Bliss got drafted to SmackDown, so it's really just Bayley and Asuka in the women's division down in NXT. Now, granted, there are other divas that have had multiple matches, and we know their names, and they have had a bit of success so far, but none of them have gotten anywhere close to the title picture, or even really have been considered notable opponents to any of the main stars yet. Now, with that being said, I have to assume Bayley will not be debuting at Battleground, and that Sasha Banks' surprise tag team partner will end up being the return of Naomi, who has been out for quite a while, thus changing her into a face and kind of sparking up the SmackDown Divas division as Naomi was drafted there. So, that's kind of what I'm thinking is going to take place. I wouldn't quote me on any of that, but that's just kind of what I've been thinking as we cover all of these matches and all of these events as of late. And that's something to think about, because whenever there's a mystery opponent, we don't really know who it's going to be until it happens, right? There's also a lot of speculation behind the WWE bringing in older talent to return. There have been big names such as Goldberg and Kurt Angle that people are speculating about. And then, of course, guys like Rob Van Dam and a lot of guys that we've seen the past couple months or years make short appearances and then kind of leave. Because the two rosters do need to be beefed up a little bit more, I would assume. And whether they pull from the Cruiserweight Classic competitors or not, I still think there's going to be more room to improve. So, moving on to the Cruiserweight Classic, I was very excited for this. The opening match featured the returning Tajiri, who you guys should definitely know if you were a WWE fan or a wrestling fan in general. He wrestled for the WWE for a couple years in the early 2000s. He's known as the Japanese Buzzsaw for a reason, and he has some of the hardest kicks, notably to the face and to the back, that I've ever seen. He also does the Tarantula, which is a submission move in the ropes, and he used to do the Japanese Green Mist, which would basically blind his opponent. Not sure if they're bringing that back or not, but we did not see it in this match. Tajiri took on Damian Slater, a young kid from, I believe, Australia, who put on a pretty strong showing against the Japanese veteran, but in the end, Tajiri hit him with a couple really hard kicks and picked up the win to move on to the second round. As I said previously, Tajiri is one of those guys that I'm going to be keeping my eye on. I definitely expect him, I definitely expected him to go to the second round. He may even win the next matchup that he is put in. I don't think he's going to win the finale, and the same can be said for the Brian Kendrick, but, I think he is definitely someone who we will see on SmackDown or Raw, or maybe NXT, following the conclusion of the Cruiserweight Classic. Next up, we had TJ Perkins versus DeMac. TJ Perkins, for those of you who have watched TNA, is most notable for playing the wrestling, or for being the wrestler Suicide. A lot of people also knew him as Manic over in TNA. Take a quick break if you don't know him. Google search TNA Suicide, and he had a really cool character, really cool mask. Kind of reminds you of someone like Deadpool that's silent, if that makes sense. And I was extremely excited when I heard he was in this tournament. He's also another strong favorite going in, and he faced off against DeMac, who is basically like a German Michael Jackson kind of character. Both of them are very flamboyant, or very, I don't know, very show-offy, and have a wide range of moves that they can use during their matches. We saw a lot of flips, we saw a lot of counters, a lot of submissions, a lot of high flying moves. These guys are two of the best technically in the tournament, and it was a tremendous match that you guys should all watch. In the end, though, TJ Perkins ended up picking up the victory, as many suspected, and I'm excited to see how he does. Next up, we saw Lince Dorado versus Mustafa Ali, the Mexican versus the guy from Pakistan, and this was a surprisingly tremendous match. We saw the half of the moves that were done in this match I didn't know the name of, and that's saying something because I usually know most of these wrestling moves, or at least a variation of them. Definitely, I honestly, I can't recommend watching these matches enough to get the full experience. But Mustafa Ali put on a really strong showing, but just couldn't quite pick up the victory, leaving Lince Dorado to win the match after hitting like a Hurricanrana Bulldog brainbuster kind of move that honestly looked like it could have broken Mustafa's neck. Definitely check that out. Don't know what the move was called. It didn't seem like the commentators did either, but it was a tremendous, tremendous match. Lastly, we had Akira Tozawa versus Kenneth Johnson. Tozawa is definitely a person to keep an eye on, and he kind of proved that he has that strong style that a lot of the Japanese wrestlers do. He hit a German suplex out of nowhere halfway through the match, and he had a lot of extremely, extremely hard-hitting strikes that he used as well. Kenneth Johnson was extremely resilient, and it seemed like he even had more of an offense for most of the match. But Akira Tozawa just had such an array of striking and suplexes and slams. He just barraged Kenneth Johnson with everything that he had, and in the end it did pay off as he picked up the victory, being the second Japanese guy in the tournament to move on to the second round. Now, as I've told you guys before, I will link in the description below the tournament brackets for the Cruiserweight Classic. I have my predictions in there, so you can see what I think is going to happen, and you can also get live updates as to who is winning in the tournament and who is advancing. Honestly, this looks like a tremendous, tremendous tournament. I wish they would have a couple more matches per show instead of spreading it over, the course of 10 weeks or whatever it is. But, I really don't have a lot to complain about. It's honestly the most exciting thing that the WWE has done in a long time, outside of the draft that we just had, of course. But overall, I'm very excited, and I have a couple fan favorites that are favorites of mine that I believe will, be in the final four or so in this tournament. So that's about it. I want to let you guys know we're going to be continuing our gameplay of Grand Theft Auto, and if you guys have any other games you'd like to see me play, please feel free to leave a comment down below. I will continue to do these weekly recaps, and we will talk about Battleground next week, which should have been a pretty good pay-per-view. But yeah, I want to ask you guys to leave a comment down below, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you have anything you'd like to say, please do so. I want to thank you guys all for watching, and I will see you real soon.